o'clock, we will call to order the Extension, Education, Economics, and Development Committee. Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Public comment, we do not have any. Okay, thank you. Number 4, approve the January 5th, 2023 EEED Committee minutes. Do we have a motion? Motion by Supervisor Rosenberg, Supervisor Niedermeyer, second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Number 5, policy issue discussion and potential committee determination. 5A, update the strategic plan. Now, as you look at the changes that were that was suggested by the executive committee, there is a couple words that we do have to change, that while we should change in the outcome measuring on the number 3, where Madison County government role is providing, it should go to what the heck was the wording for that? No, I had it written down here. Support. And on number 4, Madison County government role in supporting those two. That was a suggestion made. Everything else that I see looks like we have everything in line here. So, but if anybody else has any suggestions, feel free. Tom?
Yeah, I don't, support is a better word, but I'd like to put proactively support.
Do we need to put that in there?
Support says you're waiting for somebody else to do something and then you're supporting them. Proactively says you're actively seeking. That's my thought.
Okay. Any thoughts from the committee on that? Lance, do you have a comment on that by any chance?
No comment. I certainly can appreciate the kind of the logical distinction that Supervisor Rosenberg is trying to get at. I'm happy to draft. We're happy to draft whatever the committee wishes to recommend to executive when they take this up at their next meeting.
Seefeld?
Yes, go ahead, Supervisor Baker.
I drafted it, the supporting, and I personally prefer to leave it that way. So that's my what I would like to I'd like to make a motion to adopt it as drafted.
Is there a second to that? Supervisor Unger, we'll open it up for discussion. Supervisor Rosenberg.
Well, maybe I'm repeating myself, but I'd just like to see us actively doing something rather than waiting around for somebody else to do something. And I mean, I think there are things that come across desks and we can move it ahead more aggressively.
Okay. Well, yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to have feedback. So I'm not disagreeing with whether we should be proactive or not proactive in our approach, but what I'm saying is that in this phase, we're providing recommendations for the board to adopt or consider. So those recommendations can be proactive, but right now what we're doing is our committee with input from outside supervisors and other stakeholders are providing those recommendations. So I think that's up to us to determine over the course of the next 6-8 months of, what we want those recommendations to be. Thank you.
Thank you. And at our last executive committee meeting, it was suggested that we put support in and changing the providing. So that's what we're going, I think we should go by. But we do have a motion on the floor. All those in favor for the strategic plan with the changes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried, but not unanimously. Thank you.
Just 10.6 though, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Now the rest of it that is written in here, I think is written correctly and should be passed as a complete strategic plan from the EED. If there's any other suggestions?
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Supervisor Baker.
So on 10.8, objective strategy C and outcome measure 3, which was support efforts to develop a Kowalski Road I-39 interchange to enhance job creation and accelerate housing development was strategy C. And outcome measure 3, by December 31st, 2024, complete an interchange justification report for the proposed Kowalski Road I-39 interchange. Both of those got substantial pushback at the executive committee. I was the one that sponsored those and I'm happy with them. But in response to the request by the executive committee, I did draft potential changes to make them more generic to multiple counties. I'll read what I drafted. So strategy C would be changed, could be changed to support efforts by cities and villages throughout Marathon County to develop good transportation access, which is intended to enhance job creation and accelerate housing development. And then outcome measure 3, by August 1st, 2023, survey city and village leaders throughout Marathon County and identify 3 to 5 transportation project proposals with the potential for a high impact on job creation and housing development for possible future county support. And I am fine with the original draft. I just drafted the new ones in response to the executive committee. I would also vote for changing them if that's what the committee wants, but I'm happy with either version, whatever our committee decides to forward.
Any thoughts from the committee? Well, I think personally, this is my thought, that the way it's written now in the proposal here, I think this is what we should pass.
Can you clarify?
Well, all the changes that are in here now, what is this is from the executive committee, from the last executive committee meeting. Whatever in red that is in here, the outcome measures, and on 10.6, there was a couple develop policies for support affordable, high-quality child care to enhance work availability. As it's written in the packet here, I would, hopefully we would support this if that's fine with the committee. Any suggestions?
I'd be in favor of supporting the changes and suggestions from that Dave had made to his 10.8 and the 10.6 ones. So yeah,
To add that?
I would just supportive of the changes that he made to strategy C for 10.8 to the more generic, not just directly focused on the Kowalski I-39 exchange. So
You putting that in the form of a motion?
I'll motion for that. Yeah.
Is there a second? Supervisor Unger?
I'll second that.
Okay. Supervisor Unger did. I missed it. I wasn't looking down the side here. Okay, thank you. Any more discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the changes to the strategic plan, say aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Motion's carried. Not unanimous, but motion is carried. Thank you. Get back to the agenda here. Okay, number 6, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolutions, or policy. Number 7, educational presentation and committee discussion. Now, I moved up, was suggested to move up the reports from our support staff to do their monthly reports so that if they have to leave, that's fine with me. If you want to stay, you can stay and listen to the rest of the meeting. But this is, hopefully this works out for our support staff. If not, we can change it back. But as of right now, we're going to go with this way it is now. 7A, McDevco. Kim?
All right, so busy start to the year for us, so I'll kind of give you an overview of what we're looking at for 2023. So McDevco continues to offer gap financing in partnership with the Marathon County Revolving Loan Fund for startup and expanding businesses in Marathon County. So we do encourage, I know one of the points in the strategic plan is to enhance awareness of McDevco. Our website is newly updated. All of our gap financing resources for the city of Wausau and Marathon County are on there. If you know of any startup or expanding businesses needing support, either educational or financing, please have them reach out to us. We have some really great opportunities to help spark this type of development faster than if somebody were to have to raise additional capital on their own. So please make sure that you're sharing that. We are working on a POUTS loan program in partnership with Marathon County. More to come on that in the coming months here. So loans are really going to be a big focus for us in making sure that we're helping support that business growth in our community. So like I said, continue to send folks our way. We continue to administrate COVID grants on behalf of the city of Wausau and Marathon County. To date, we've dispersed $210,000 of the Marathon County CDBG funds. That program is going to be ending here at the end of May. So we're hopeful to still get a few more funds out in the community before that wraps up. I haven't updated the program calendar below, but I'll kind of share what we've done in the past year and then what we're looking to do this year. So McDevco really specializes in gap financing, as you heard me talk about, entrepreneurial development and education and business incubation, as well as municipality support and partnership. So this educational piece is really important. There's a market for small businesses that really need educational support and various workshops and things in a different way than maybe if they were, seeking strategic planning services. So this is something that we're going to start offering, and we have been offering consistently as workshops on a variety of different topics. So based on polls and feedback we've gotten, we'll be hosting a strategic planning workshop in the next couple of months. We'll host a networking workshop this year, as well as a marketing workshop and some QuickBooks and or Excel trainings, very expedited 2 to 3 workshops for folks looking to really enhance their knowledge base without a huge time commitment while giving them a lot of value in that time. And then we'll still be leveraging our Women Mentoring Women programs with some roundtable discussions, and then finishing the year with our core program, the Gear Certificate of Entrepreneurial Excellence. So that is an extensive program that gives folks essentially, it's 16 workshops crammed into those weeks that we hosted of different things from insurance to HR to commercial real estate to hiring employees, finance projections, things like that. Everything they need to know if they have a business idea or they're getting ready to start and they just need a little bit more support. We've been very excited that 3 out of 10 businesses that take that program launch, compared to 1 in 10 that we've seen. So based on the great feedback we've gotten from our mentors and businesses that have taken the class, we've continually evolved that program to be more and more impactful for our community. I've spent some time with the youth entrepreneurs in the area also. I'll be judging at the DC Everest Entrepreneur Competition, as well as inviting them in for another tour of the business incubator that we manage. So we try to really make sure our educational programs coincide with what we do at the business incubator, offering tours to students in our programs. Maybe they're working out of their home and they need a co-working space, or maybe they're ready for an office or manufacturing space. So really trying to market that as an opportunity before they take the leap, and all of the burdens of potentially having a brick and mortar. So we try to really market that as a positive. And you can see we've done a lot of work with our filling of the space. So when McDevco started managing the entrepreneurial center and managing the leases and the occupancy of the offices and manufacturing, we were 61% full. We reported 86% full at the end of January. So all manufacturing is full, and we're starting a wait list, and then offices still has some room for opportunity, but we try to really creatively work with folks to use that space so that we can fill the location. We continue to host municipality meetings every quarter. We had one in February, highest attendance in a while, with 17 in attendance, where we get together and talk about things on a municipality level that we can support one another with. So we'll continue to work on all of these things, but the core of McDevco is truly the educational programming we offer and segueing into helping place them with some office or manufacturing in the incubator, or finance them when they're ready to move on or launch their business. So if you know of anyone, like I said, please send them my way. If you don't have my contact information, I'll hang around too so you can gather that. But any questions?
Any questions for Kim? Thank you. Moving on, 7B, library report. Leah?
Thank you, Chair. You have my report in the packet. A lot has happened since I drafted this report. One thing from an operations standpoint is the RFP for the strategic plan consulting just went live yesterday. So we're excited to see what comes through. We're already getting interest for that. It's one of my SMART goals for the year, and also something that the library board has talked about for several years. Another cool initiative we have that just recently launched is mobile hotspots. These are available at all of our locations. We have a couple, I think 2 per location. And it's grant funded right now through the year, so we'll see how it goes. It can be a little bit pricey, but if it's valuable to the community, we will look for ways to support that further. For right now, all you have to do is go to your local library and check one out. A lot of programs we have coming up. Our own Dr. Toms is going to be doing a presentation for the book that she wrote on March 21st at 6 p.m. Also, we just recently had a local leader chat. This is a new series that we just started, and this most recent one was with Chief Bliven from the Wausau Police Department and Deputy Chief Barnes, and it had a really good response. I think we got about 20 people from the community to come in and have a chat and talk with local law enforcement. We're scheduling additional ones. We're going to have probably the fire department, hopefully talk about fire safety and that kind of thing, and see who else we can bring in so community members can have a meet and greet have an opportunity to ask questions. So that's something that's new and exciting for our adult programming. Extension, we're doing monthly programs. I think we had to cancel the last one because of the snowstorm. But we've got things planned, I think, every month through the year to do some in-person programming. The next one is starting from seed, so it's learning to grow, which is really cool. Our Lena Start cohort, we've been doing this program for about 5.5 years. That just started, or is starting tonight, our first week of the new cohort, so that's cool. We also recently rearranged our story times to have age grouping, so we have like a story time specifically just for babies. We've got a story time just for toddlers, and then we have our usual family story time. They've been a huge hit. Like, we are mobbed during story times, so they've been going really, really well, and I think having that age-focused one is really great for parents to have, like, sensory things, for the young ones, and more simple programming, and then have more advanced stuff as you get older. So that's everything I think that's come up since this report. Oh, no, there's one other thing. Starting tomorrow, the Wausau School District has their art cluster. We host that every year. So starting tomorrow for 2 weeks, 4th and 5th graders will be displaying their art at the library, so you can come by anytime the library is open to check that out. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you for your report. Thank you. 7C, UW Extension, Jeremy.
Thank you, Chair Seefeld. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'll highlight a few things in the packet and then a couple of other updates. Lots of programming going on, even though we've had some things canceled like everybody else due to weather. It's been a little messy, but a couple of things to highlight. The 4-H enrollment, which is obviously a big program. Marathon County's always been a big 4-H program. We're seeing a pretty dramatic increase in enrollment again, which is really great to see, and we're likely to top 1,000 full enrollments. That includes 4-H members, volunteers, and everybody, including the Clover Buds. But that's a pretty dramatic rise over the past few years.
That was, last couple of years, it was like in the 800s, wasn't it?
Yeah.
750, 800?
Yeah.
Okay.
Down, I think the lowest that I saw in the midst of the pandemic was maybe like close to 700. So it's been a good turnaround, and
good.
Holly's been doing an amazing job, and Jasmine with that program. So that's great to see. We actually, this isn't in your packet, although it mentions the planning, but we just completed the manure summit, which is one of those things that doesn't seem like all that big of a deal, but it's a pretty substantial thing because it turns out manure is a bit of a source of problems, right? So the summit, which was a statewide event that Heather led, was held in Green Bay and focused on how to help farmers deal with manure, but particularly from the kind of on-farm perspective of developing biogas, safe storage, all of those kind of things. So that was just held this week, actually. So good, another event back in person and getting good response. And then a couple of things coming up to note. Not in your packet because it's not a fully public event, but EPIC, which is the Old Plain Watershed Group, is holding their Common Ground event coming up later this month, March 23rd. And Extension's pretty involved in helping to support that. And then the other one that Leah mentioned a little bit, but I'll just highlight, is the Seed Starting Workshop. There's a whole series of them actually throughout the county, so including Mosinee and the one at the library, but those are always popular activities, so we're looking forward to that. And then a couple of updates. We have actually the only staff opening we have right now is within FoodWise, and that's the Healthy Communities Coordinator who works regionally. So we're just in the process of hiring for that. That was just approved at leadership level today, I believe. So that'll move forward. But the other part of FoodWise is that we currently in Marathon County don't have a nutrition educator in the schools. Gaonu is working at the community level and doing great work, but we don't have anything happening in schools right now, and that's a big gap. So we're looking at opportunities to bring a position in, whether that's at halftime or full-time, we don't quite know yet, but expect in the next few months we'll kind of get things sorted out there and get nutrition education back into schools through FoodWise. I think that's it for right now. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, I do. I have one. Going back to the manure situation.
Of course.
Yeah. There's getting to be less and less dairy farmers and more crop farmers. Do the dairy farmers go out and ask their neighbors that do not apply manure on their lands, are doing cropping to maybe, because I know you can only put so much on phosphorus.
Right.
The big farms got to be monitored. Have they gone out to their neighbors, or has that been a suggestion from the extension?
Yeah, so we have educators who work to support nutrient management plans, which are those plans of how they manage manure. And each farm, particularly the larger farms, have to have a nutrient management plan in place and participate in workshops to do that. Or they have consultants do that work for them, depending on size. But part of that work is often working with surrounding farmers to do that, because they often don't have enough land of their own to spread all of their manure. So that often, plays out and is part of what Extension would do to support those farmers. If they need those connections, they can help with those. But particularly through those classes, they kind of make those connections and develop those plans.
Thank you. The reason I asked is that I was asked if my land could be used to apply manure from a big farm. And basically what they have to do is they have to put wherever they apply on my land into their nutrient program.
Right.
So it's not a big deal.
Right.
They monitor it, and you still can plant your own crops and stuff. It's just they have to, monitor the amount of nutrients they're putting on your land.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, moving on. 7D, UWSP Azali?
Ozella.
Okay, Ozella. Okay.
Oz is fine. Just say Oz. How's everybody doing? So I would just highlight a couple things. We are happy that our application and admits continue to be up from this time last year, so that's amazing. We still won't know our enrollment number until the 10th day of classes in the fall, but every week since fall application period has been open, we have been up in applications and admits, so that's great. Today we had admitted student days. We had students on campus and their families. And I was talking to a couple of students. Both students were born and raised here, but one currently lived in Milwaukee, and the other, I think he said 2.5 hours away. I can't remember the town. But they wanted to come back here to go to school, so I thought that was really cool. So it says a lot about this community that they're coming back here for college, although they moved at some point after getting older. So it was an exciting time on campus today. I'm just leaving there from Admitted Student Day. Let's see here. So we had a visioning session on December 5th, and we invited several community people on campus to come in and just talk about what they want to see as far as our campus and what are some needs and things of that nature. Several things came out of that session. One thing that came out was that we need to be more intentional in our efforts to brand and our campus and to create community awareness. There were just some things about our campus people had no idea, and they've been in this community their whole life. And so So one step towards that is we're going to have some surveys that are come out soon, I think sometime this month. They were created by the marketing folks on the main campus, and basically it'll be a survey for our community members and alumni. It'll be a survey for current students and a survey for faculty and staff. And they are pretty quick, take maybe 4 or 5 minutes to complete, but really trying to gauge the perceptions people have of the campus and what are some things we need to really do to get that awareness out there. So please look out for those surveys, because hopefully everybody in this room will get that survey sometime this month. We had our MLK program on the campus on the 16th of January. We had about 167 people who attended, so that was really neat. So thank you for all of those who came. We also co-hosted Black History events throughout the month of February, so you probably heard about several of those, so just a really exciting time. Also, our Husky male basketball team were the league champs. We're league champs, so that was really neat. I think this is been several years in a row. So we had a lot of people from the community who showed up to support. So that was really, really nice to see everybody there rooting on our Huskies. Let's see here. So we have Hank Talks coming up, one this month and one next month. And so you have those there. And then Viewpoint Day, April 5th. So we do have another day where students can come in, view the campus, get a tour, learn about programs and things of that nature. We know traditionally a lot of students tend to apply and accept admittance to the 2-year campuses a little bit later than most 4-year campuses. And so we do have a Viewpoint Day in April just to try to capture some of those students who have not decided what they want to do yet after high school. And then the last thing we have here is we'll have Scholars Eve on May the 2nd. This is something we've had in a couple years since the pandemic, since COVID. But it's a night where we acknowledge our graduating seniors. So it's not a graduation because that's held on the main campus, but we do acknowledge those who graduated in December and also those who graduated in May and those who give out scholarships. All those will be talked about that night as well. So I think that's all I pretty much have.
Are there any questions? Well, thank you for the report. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to 7E, Housing and Child Care Review. Now, Jeremy has some points to give to us if you want
Sure.
to make your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, I can just share a little bit. In communications with our one of our community development institute program managers, I was just asking him about kind of the work that Extension has done, and he shared some resources. So I thought I'd just share those with you a little bit, and I'm happy to pass these along. I'll just kind of give you an overview, and you can see what might be kind of value. A lot of what Extension has done at the statewide level and in several of the counties has been a lot of research and just try to better understand the problem, which you are all have been involved in that as well. But there's a lot more background information, particularly there's some really interesting resources related to childcare, particularly focused on locations of lack of childcare, like down to a pretty narrow range, and some interesting maps just to look at that based on census data and registry of child care providers and all of that. And then there's several presentations just again on background. But a couple of things that I think that are particularly interesting that other counties have been involved in and are, I think, similar to strategies that are being considered here. So just put these out here for consideration is they've done child care boot camp, which is basically been an incentivized process of obtaining licensure and ongoing professional development for child care providers. So it's basically, I know one of the strategies is try to make sure that we're supporting and maintaining child care workers and child care providers. And one of those barriers is just training and cost of all those kind of things. So the boot camp has been developed to basically address some of that. And actually Extension statewide has some funding, I believe, from WEDC over the next year to redevelop those boot camps, and are basically in the process of figuring out where those should happen in the state. So there's an opportunity to partner on that. So I would say that's one of the main things. And then other conversations, strategy-wise, I know this is a super challenging issue, as you've all discussed. But I think it was mentioned at the last meeting, the partnerships between businesses or municipalities and childcare providers to guarantee spots seems to be a consistent strategy that works in other communities as well. The other thing that's come up, I'll just throw this out here because I think it's interesting, and when I've asked others, what's been working besides those two things, is basically trying to figure out a way to partner with schools to institutionalize childcare in some way. So that's the other, and again, that's come up as well. So that's some childcare resources and strategies, again, just for consideration. Happy to pass on details. And then on the housing side of things, again, lots of research that's been done and data that's been pulled together through the Applied Population Lab at UW-Madison, which is connected to Extension and other studies in communities. But there's also kind of case studies of counties that have done effective things. There's just an example, Bayfield County, partnership between the county and a developer to develop primarily low-income housing. But actually, the primary thing I wanted to mention is that Bayfield County just hired the first Extension housing educator. So there's been general work in community development around housing, but Bayfield County, because they've identified this as a primary area, has asked Extension to specifically hire a housing educator, and we can expect out of that more resources and programming that we'll be able to tap into as well. That person started yesterday, I think. So it's going to obviously take a little while, but again, I think there'll be more resources from Extension to be able to support some of this work and continue learning. So.
Okay, thank you. Administrator Leonard.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to kind of, I hope, get you guys kicked off on, really this is intended, I believe, in speaking with Chair Seefeld, to be that next step in the conversation that was started with the real conversation that's been going on for a long time. But you had a number of presentations at the county board at your last two meetings. Your educational meeting, you had Dale Knapp and Dave Ekman. Dale Knapp from Forward Analytics and Dave Ekman from the Greater Wausau Region Chamber of Commerce, talking about worker shortage and a couple of things that from their perspectives are driving that apart from just demographics. And those issues were what are on your agenda. Housing and childcare were two big pieces. And then at your next meeting, you had a presentation from North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning relative to a regional housing study. And Sam Wessel provided that presentation. He left off a very important fact. The county board funded part of that. You did that. You were one of their large funders apart from the municipalities. But that gave you a picture of what what housing looks like and some of the pressures that exist. I'll add a little bit more context before we get into some specific things, really building off what Jeremy said relative to childcare. But earlier this week, I was at the Wisconsin Counties Association LEDGE conference, and those two issues were again front and center, talking about what does the future look like based on the worker shortage, the shifting demographics. There was just Dale Knapp and Mark O'Connell from the Counties Association were talking about the projected growth in terms of labor need over the next, I believe it was through 2030, was 191,000 jobs, but new jobs, 191,000 new jobs, but we're only adding 30,000 people. So that creates quite the challenge for the state of Wisconsin. And of course, the people aren't being equally distributed throughout the state either. So you have that challenge, which Sam, Dale, and Dave also spoke about. But to help you start the conversation about housing and childcare and examining what role, if any, the county has in, as Supervisor Baker referenced, supporting supporting those two things, both from an internal and external perspective. As an employer, the internal side, and we employ just about 800 people. So we have, those things are barriers to us being successful as just an employer. Ignore the fact that we're government. 800 people, every day, we have issues come up where people are having challenges related to childcare and housing that impacts their ability to remain employed with us. But externally is what role does the government play, does Marathon County play in terms of convener, perhaps, or through allocating resources, which you'll hear about as it relates to childcare in a little bit, that some counties are doing. So with that background, we'll, if we may, Mr. Chair, go right into the informational presentation, then we're happy to take questions. We wanted to give you a little bit more context of the work that we've been doing, staff have been doing based on the direction from this committee to pursue the Dream Up grant. And again, just for context, this is all within your packet, but Marathon County was the lead applicant in our community. We had a lot of community stakeholders that joined in that application to apply for a couple of things. One was technical assistance from the Department of Children and Families to help us do essentially a strategic planning event, an exercise to try to figure out what is the current state of childcare, as Jeremy alluded to, what are some of the pain points, but then also how can we identify levers we can pull to increase the availability and access. So we've been participating in that for quite a number of months, and there are a number of people here to talk more about what that's looked like and give you a bit of a presentation. And I hope that gives you some ideas. And the good news is everything Jeremy just talked about, we've been talking about for a while, and some people in the room have been doing that. The bad news, we still have all the challenges that have existed. Those things that we're doing, the boot camps, the talking with employers about those innovative partnerships, we're certainly having those conversations. We're having people go through boot camps. We're having people go into and graduate from NTC with their certificates in early childhood education, but we're still having a lot of the challenges. We still have wait lists that are pushing 2 years for people to get child care. So those things still exist. But in terms of our Dream Up work, we wanted to have a presentation where we walk you through really what we've been doing the last several months, give you an update on the second part that we got, apart from the technical assistance. The good news, it came with money. It was $75,000, which isn't enough it's a drop in the bucket really, but it's something that we can try to utilize to help get us moving in the right direction. We're going to talk about the plan that group came up with, and we made this presentation to Health and Human Services yesterday. And because we're the lead grant applicant, Marathon County, we're essentially serving as the fiscal agent. So the monies come in from Department of Children and Families, the $75,000. This group has spent months working on the plan for how those funds would be distributed. And Health and Human Services approved a budget amendment to essentially be that pass-through, that fiscal agent, and that's going to be going to the board later this month. But with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to welcome our team here to give us the rest of the presentation. And I think we're going to start with Aaron, and then he's going to pass it off, I'm sure.
We're trying to arrange
this.
I'll take that one, sure. Thanks. I'll be brief because a lot of these slides you've seen before, so I'll try to run through them fairly quickly. But my name's Aaron Ruff. I'm with the Marathon County Health Department. I've had the privilege of facilitating the Dream Up group for the last probably 5 or 6 months. And it's been a really fun process. I've learned a ton. I have 2 young kids myself, 3- and 5-year-old boys. And what I realized over the last 6 months is truly how complex the childcare world is. I have my own personal story of our battles with childcare, but it's been really interesting to be a part of it and learn about it. And so today we're going to walk you through our process a little bit. I also have 2 awesome members of our core team who are content experts. So I'm gonna kind of do a high-level overview, and Kelly and Elsa are going to tell us more. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves first before I start?
Sure thing. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kelly Borchard. I'm the Executive Director of Child Caring, which is the child care resource and referral agency that's been serving the Marathon County area for about 30 years now, and I've been a part of that agency for over 20 years, so well-versed in what's happening here in Marathon County.
I think so. Hi, my name is Elsa Duranzo. I'm with the North Central Wisconsin Workforce Development Board. I'm the Worker Advancement Initiative Grant Coordinator, and how I got involved with this group is that my organization, we decided to use a good portion of that money to increase childcare availability throughout our 9-county region by increasing family home providers. So we've been pretty successful. Right now I have 29 participants, and of them, 11 of them have received or reached some sort of regulation.
Like I said, I'll provide a quick overview of what you guys have seen already. This is our core team. This is sort of the representation that we have in our community, which is great. Like I said, it's been really fun to learn about sort of the realities of childcare in our community. One of the things I said last night at Health and Human Services is that this is not a problem unique to Marathon County. There's many counties throughout the state who are facing these childcare shortages. It's not just us. We're going to hear a little bit later from Kelly about some of the some other counties in the state who are being proactive and who are looking at this as an issue that they can address as a county government. So we'll talk about that. We did use a facilitated process for our conversations over about a 5 or 6 meeting period. And really, it's called results-based accountability. Really, the goal is to get everyone on the same page and really figure out what does success look like. How do we determine that? And I want to steal one of Lance's lines from the last time he presented to you, but coming up with this result took about 1 or 2 meetings. And I think he said, you think it'd be easy to come up with something like this, but defining the result and what we wanted to achieve was really important. And you'll see it in front of you there. I want to point out that working families was a big part of this, especially when we talk about economic development and workforce. We want parents and families who want to be in the workforce to be able to do that without limitations through childcare. So that's one of the main drivers for a lot of this Stream Up work is the economic development perspective and workforce. How do we keep our workforce strong by allowing parents who want to work to be able to work? The next thing is really how do we measure success? Again, you guys have seen this. These are two of the primary indicators that we have data for in our community, and they're the number of regulated childcare providers in the county and the total number of childcare slots, the total number of children that can be provided care through these regulated providers. So as you can see, we're trending in the wrong direction. We've lost a lot of providers over the last 10 to 13 years. From 2001 to 2002, we lost 10. Do you have anything to add, Kelly, about that?
I do. I think one of the places where we see the significant drop in childcare is around the family childcare providers. And I double-checked some numbers, and we've experienced in the past 5 years, 36% of the family childcare providers in Marathon County closed. In just 2018, we had 64, so today we have 41. I think the number would have even been lower if it wasn't for recruitment and retention efforts among our child caring staff, as well as the extra supports like ELSA's program, and there's some other new initiatives that are happening as well. So, I think we even double-checked numbers within the last couple of months, and we're continuing to just sort of see we're not opening as many as that are closing at this point yet.
And this does include group child care centers like the YMCA or Wausau Child Care, and also in-home family providers. The next one, again, is looking at total capacity or number of slots. As you can see, that's also declining over time. I didn't have this number last night, but I have it today. There's about 8,000 kids in Marathon County between the ages of 0 and 4. So that's presumably kids that would need childcare, and we only have 3,400 childcare slots. And can you talk as well about capacity, like the number of slots versus the actual number of children that are served?
Right, so licensed Are you meaning that, like, if a program is licensed for 8
Yes.
children, they often might serve 10 to 12 part-time?
I was thinking the other way, where a child care center might have the capacity to serve 50 children, but because of staff shortages or classrooms that are closed, they can actually only serve 30, 35.
Exactly. That's our number one crisis right now, is the workforce shortage, and this idea that many centers have the capacity, the environment, and the space to have more kids, but they can't because they can't find the staff to staff the classrooms, and so we're facing shortages of slots because of classrooms not being able to be opened. The pandemic is where it really started to hit us really hard. Prior to that, at least child care centers had some applicants for jobs. Today, they just don't have applicants of people applying to work in child care. Anything more to say to that, Elsa?
And I mean, we've talked about this before, but the main reason of that is because childcare teachers are paid so little. And how do we compete with, private industry like Quick Trip or Crystal Finishings, who will start you off at $17.50 an hour and full benefits, when the average childcare worker will make about $12 an hour and no benefits, and they have some sort of degree, most of them.
And I think that's, part of our issue today is to just reinforce this idea that it's not about opening a shiny new center. It's about really strategizing how we improve the workforce for child care providers.
Yeah, and so the group talked at length about what does success look like, and on both of these graphs you can see success is really turning the curve. How do we support current providers so that they can offer more capacity, and also we simply need more regulated child care providers. So we did a lot of, we're kind of like looking at a 30,000-foot view today. There's a lot of factors that go into this. We'll probably get into that a little bit, I'm sure, in today's discussion. But this is really sort of what emerged for us. These are sort of the big buckets or big strategies that have emerged through the group. So I'll give you guys a second to read those. Like Kelly had just mentioned, I think, and I know Elsa wants these flipped, but investing and retaining our current child care workforce is really the top priority at this point. You'll see in a couple slides that that's really the goal of the majority of the Dream Up funding is we need to invest in and support child care providers that we currently have. We can't afford, doors closing or classrooms closing. It's already happening at a rate that's too quick. So most of the money from this funding opportunity will be invested in our current child care providers. And I think Lance had said it at the beginning, but this $75,000 certainly isn't going to solve the problem here. This whole opportunity has been a great way for our community to come together. We have a great group. We have a great core team who's ready to solve this problem. But the 75 will certainly help, but it's not gonna make the difference. Just keep that in mind. This is just another, a lot of this stuff we've covered is kind of another way to look at it. I think Kelly hit the nail on the head where it's really about childcare staff and workforce. Without that, we can't have providers, we can't have capacity to serve kids, et cetera. The childcare business model is broken. We can talk about that a little bit too, where it's simply not feasible for childcare to raise rates and put the burden on families. They need help to be able to keep the lights on and pay their staff a living wage. And so that's an important component. I know it was talked about earlier about how can businesses and government partner to help childcare providers stay afloat. So that's sort of the second half of the strategy for us is how do we look at different childcare models here in Marathon County. We can get into what other communities are doing or what they're thinking about as well, but I want to let you two jump in as well.
Well, I can certainly reinforce this idea of the broken business model among childcare, and it's this idea that it's a unique model and it isn't like other businesses that sell a product or a service and they're able to charge what they need to pay their workers comparable and fair wages. And in childcare, the affordability aspect for families, when parents are paying $10,000, $12,000 a year for care and the workers are only making a small amount of money, that's a problem. That's a problem that needs significant support both publicly as well as privately. And so I think that's sort of the way that we're coming at this, is it's a broken business model, needs support beyond, what the parents can afford to pay. I think if you'd like, I could talk a little bit about what's happening in some of the other communities across Wisconsin. So I've been gathering a list here and knowing, I appreciated, I heard Jeremy talking a little bit about some strategies through UW Extension. There's a number of communities and counties across Wisconsin, like Jackson County, for example. They're using ARPA dollars to pay retention bonuses to the child care workers in those communities. City of Sun Prairie also is using grants to support existing child care programs. Wapaka County, they have a several-pronged approach where they're offering program support specialists and startup grants for child care centers in that community. Sheboygan County has $2 million that they set aside for ARPA dollars for recruitment specialists, inclusion specialists to help with behavior issues in child care programs. They're also offering retention and recruitment stipends to workers. Calumet County is another great example. Two that really hit close to home here in Marathon County are two initiatives that I'm directly involved in. In Wood County, there's a task force that's been meeting for the past year. And as a task force, we put in a request for almost $6 million to that county ARPA committee to support 6 strategies around figuring out the child care problems we're facing there. And then Wood County is another great example, Portage County. Portage County, we're right in the process of requesting funding for 3 strategies around recruiting more workers, offering mental health supports to the existing child care workers, as well as a private-public partnership business model type of concept like Elsa has chatted about a little bit, but it's an opportunity for businesses to purchase slots, like I heard mentioned here today, and then also using some of the ARPA dollars to support that, as well as a parent pay portion. So in Portage County, we'll be presenting on March 13th to their finance committee for the second time to see if they would allocate $1.7 million to that proposal. So I feel like there's a lot of momentum and initiatives happening very close here to Marathon County that we could capitalize on, right? I think it works great to do a regional approach. Is there anything else you want me to touch on, Aaron?
That's great.
Okay.
We'll open up for questions, I'm sure. So this is kind of where we've landed since we were here when these 3 were here in March, in January. These are our SMART goals that we've established for the Dream Up funding specifically. Really, again, these should be flipped, where the top priority is really to invest in and retain the current child care providers. But also there's this strong desire, like we've mentioned, that we have to start looking at investigating different business models here in Marathon County. We have to start thinking bigger. We have to, and that's sort of where we're at right now, is continuing to meet as a group to try to solve the big problem and figure out what are some models and strategies we can replicate that other communities are doing. And then the last slide here is just simply the breakdown of the budget. So there is, I don't want to say restrictions, that's not the right word. I'm trying to think of what word I used last night, but there are
Guidelines?
Guidelines, there you go, that's a better word. There are guidelines on how the funding can be spent. Up to 10% of the $75,000 can be spent on administrative costs. And so you'll see $7,500 will be retained by the health department for my time to be able to coordinate and facilitate the group. And then the rest is really being, like Lance had mentioned, is a pass-through to child caring. So that, and child caring is really a tremendous partner, and they're the ones that are working every day with our child care providers. And so they're really going to be the organization that already has the relationships and can communicate directly with our providers. And then really the big budget item there is to be able to provide up to $5,000. Again, that's a contingent of the grant that we can't provide more than $5,000 to one provider. And so Child Caring has developed a process to grant that money to our existing providers to help offset any cost. Anything else you wanted to?
Yeah, I think up to 12 centers would be eligible for these grants, and it could help with retention efforts like compensation, program supplies, equipment, minor renovations. We would make it so they would have allowable expenses to choose from, and then having some flexibility to choose what their program needs. So maybe one center might need some funding to advertise for a new staff person, and maybe utilize some of that funding for a retention grant for a really great staff that's been there a while. Or maybe a center needs new play equipment for outdoors or strollers to bring the babies outside. I think those are some good examples. And then, the additional funds, Child Caring would utilize that additional $2,500. We do a lot of other things with child care providers. For example, we offer informational sessions to learn more about becoming a regulated child care provider. We offer training around sudden infant death syndrome and abusive head trauma, which are required for child care providers. We offer CPR and child abuse and neglect prevention. And then also doing some foundational trainings, which are the trainings that child care providers need to enter the field. So lots of ways that we could utilize the additional funds.
Okay, thank you. Open it up for a little discussion here. Any comments from the committee?
Yeah, I have kind of a question, but for Jeremy, on housing. And what's a housing educator?
Yeah, that's a good question. So generally, as I understand it, and I think the position will develop kind of as things move ahead, but they'll be working with kind of developers, potential tenants if there's rental situations. There's actually a curriculum and extension called Rent Smart, which has been offered here as well, to provide support for kind of people in transition to get them prepared to be effective renters, and often provide some financial support behind that. So all of those kind of things would be built into a housing educator position.
And I have one other question, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but who owns the rental housing stock in our area, and which way is it trending?
I don't have an answer for that, but I think Applied Population Lab might have some data on that, and I can look into it unless someone else has an answer there. But we have.
I think there's some of that data in that report, that housing analysis that Sam Wessel provided. It talks about rental stock. And, my sense, and I can't recall where in the document it is, but my sense is there was data that was talking about more and more of what had been held by local landlord companies is being purchased by kind of larger property management companies. You see that transition over time, which has some negative impact on the rent. Rent goes up when it's held by a larger property management company to cover the costs associated with property management. But I don't have that data in front of me, and that's, but I am 99% sure that's in that Sam Wessel, North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Housing Assessment that he provided to you at your last county board voting meeting.
Anecdotally, that's what I'm seeing too, that it's going that way, and I suspect that's rising rents and lower quality, and they live in New York, or wherever. Thank you.
I do have a question. You talk about other counties using ARPA dollars. Are they using these ARPA dollars directly to child care, as far as bringing up employments, or how are they using their ARPA dollars to support child care is what I should be asking.
Great question. Thank you for that. For example, in Sheboygan County, funding is going to an organization called Family Connections, which is a child care resource and referral agency covering the Sheboygan area. They've hired some people to work directly with the child care programs and in the community to help recruit. So for example, a person might be going to job fairs and career fairs and going out into middle schools and high schools to help recruit additional people to come into the field, as well as they're coordinating a stipend or grant type of program where they're allowing stipends to go to people to come and work at a child care program, as well as retention stipends. They're hiring people to do behavior supports within child care programs. I think that's one sort of unintended consequence that's come out of the pandemic is, the challenges that people are having with mental health. And that does not stop, with adults. It's also with young children. And so they're hiring people to help support the people who are currently working in child care. And then they also have a strategy that surrounds like startup grants more on the lines of like Elsa's current program here. So does that help? Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions or further discussion?
If I can, Chair Seefeld, just I started by saying one of the things that was talked about at the Wisconsin Counties Association Ledge Conference were these two issues of housing and childcare. And I just want to kind of reflect back a couple other anecdotes that stuck with me as was referenced before. Mark O'Connell in his conversation with Dale Knapp, one of the things he said that resonated with me was the idea that this is going to take innovative public-private partnerships to solve this problem. To Kelly's point before, this is not something that can be clearly solved by the private market solution, which is you raise the rates you would charge, because that impacts affordability, which people can't pay. And it's important, again, what resonated with me with this idea that we had a child care, we had some real challenges. When you look at that graph, going back 13 years, we started to see the challenge. The pandemic and the rapid increase in inflation made that we had those challenges specifically within childcare, but then you think about the overall environment, rapid inflation in other areas, when the comparable industries to childcare in that $13 an hour average, which the average rate of a early childhood educator in the state of Wisconsin is just under $13 an hour, is what Mark O'Connell shared. When you look at those comparable industries, those comparable positions, and those wages shot up from 13 to 15 to 17 to, you can work at Quick Trip and love Quick Trip, it's fantastic, and make $19 an hour. So it's forcing people to make very difficult decisions, even if you love the career you're in early childhood education. The rapid increase in inflation, all the other goods and services you need to survive, your family needs, you're unable to provide those on the salary you're being paid, so then you're moving to another career, which then impacts all the people that you provide childcare for. And then another thing that Mark shared was this idea that the state, the county, the municipality, or even the business that solves this, they're going to be successful. That's going to be the place that people want to move. If you can, there are people that take jobs or don't take jobs because they have childcare issues. I had this conversation this morning on our department head meeting. We have people that leave, that resign their positions and that had been working here because, hey, childcare, I'm having issues and I'm leaving, and they were highly successful employees. And we have people that can't take a job because when they find out the wait period for childcare in our area is 2 years, I got to stick where I am, even if it's people, particularly if you think about if you don't have family, right? My family wasn't generally from this area when I moved here. I had extended family, luckily that was, but it makes it really hard if you're truly relocating to an area without one of those non-traditional childcare opportunities. So I think those are some things that resonated with me from the presentation earlier this week. Thinking back to the presentation from Dave Ekman, and Dave said, the private business without an innovative public-private partnership private businesses will do their best to solve the problem on their own. One thing that raises to me is the cautionary tale of that, which is what Kelly said. If we have a solution that is someone enters the market and there's a new child care center that opens up, it's, flashy new building, and all they do is pay more than the places around them, they will pull the staff from those entities into a new one. That doesn't add slots. That doesn't really, it's not the rising tide that lifts all boats. That's just moving the problem around. So I think that's the opportunity that presents itself, and I don't know if there's a county, what the county role, if any. That's a policy decision for this body and the full board. From the internal employer side, I think there are some things that I was speaking with some of my colleagues, that local governments have some cards that they can play in this area that could entice providers to provide care within a government facility. That was at our table, we were talking about this. What does government have that perhaps could assist? And oftentimes it's facility space that we can enter into leases with, where you start to essentially allow the private operator to cross out or zero out the overhead that would otherwise be associated with a building. Property taxes, building maintenance, rent, you can allow them to offset those costs in a way that allows them to, as Kelly and Elsa said, the number one thing we're trying to deal with here is retention of staff. If those expenses on one side of your operating budget are lessened, you can reallocate the funds to make sure you're paying people a wage that keeps them in that career. So I think those are some other things that resonated with me on the child care side. Of course, the hope with all of this is, you have discussion as a committee, and you're not the only committee having this. As we said, Health and Human Services had it yesterday, this discussion of following up from your board meetings. I know HR, Finance, and Property is going to have a similar conversation. Hey, what did we learn from those presentations, and what does that mean for the county? Staff, we're here to bring you information. The decision of what those next steps are entirely standing committee and board driven conversations. My only thing I want to say is that, if you do have information you want, like Jeremy shared information today, sharing what we've learned, please don't hesitate to ask. There are probably a lot of things you want to know that we just can't give you the answer, but we'll do our best to get it toward you. Thank you.
I'd like to add to that, just to give an overview of what we've been working on. So I was just thinking about it. It's been almost a year since we were writing for the grant. That's pretty crazy. So we've been in almost a year sitting in these meetings trying to figure everything out. We've spent so much time researching what are other communities doing, what is, Rock County doing. Jackson County was working on this years even before the pandemic. And what we found is a lot of their strategies are not going to be right fit for us. So, for example, the boot camp that was brought up, the people going through those boot camps aren't getting regulated at all. They can't leave from that and be like, I'm certified, I can go do this, or something. So I don't want to say it's a waste of time, but it kind of is a waste of time, until you can get that regulation piece on the back end. So we have other strategies that we're using here. Child caring, they have their own education sessions for the required training that is needed to become regulated, whether it be somebody who needs that to go work in a center or open a family child care at their home. Other things that we've been doing, and we have gathered all of these different data models, and is figuring out, well, how do you do it? How do you do it so that way it's generally fair for everybody? We don't know. We have to meet some more. We have to just keep doing our work. And I guess I'm just letting you know that we spent a lot of brain bites on this. This is a huge, huge issue, and it is intimately embedded in the housing issue and obviously the workforce issue. So, because we can't expand childcare, then go up to, say, Greenhack and be like, we've got childcare, bring in new recruits. And then they're like, well, where do we live? So all of these issues have to be addressed at the same time.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee yet?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Supervisor Baker.
Thank you. So one question and one request. So the request is that at our presentation, Dave Ekman mentioned that there were regulations that were impacting childcare. And I would like to hear more, to learn more about that. So if we could either talk to him and bring that information back or have him share that with us at a future meeting, I would appreciate that. And then the other comment is in relationship to a point that was made in our January meeting, I believe by Elsa, which she had expressed that childcare is a common good. And it's not, the burden should not just be on the family. I'm not responding to the second part, but to the common good part. I think traditionally, childcare has been provided by families and by extended families. And I think in Marathon County, we probably have different groups of people that are more family oriented than, say, perhaps in Madison and Dane County. So I believe that we probably have more family childcare in Marathon County than normal. But I also wonder, traditionally, I believe that it has been the parents' responsibility to provide childcare. It has not been a common good. And I don't think that that mindset is necessarily agreed to by most of our constituents and even by our county board members. So I would be interested in hearing a little bit more about, how it came about that we define childcare to be a common good. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Baker. Is there it? Go ahead, Lance.
Supervisor Baker, we can send out the regulations. You're absolutely right. As referenced by Dave Ekman, there are regulations that certainly apply. Should, as Kelly and Aaron and Elsa mentioned, if you do want to become a regulated childcare provider, there are regulations that apply, and we can send the links to the administrative code provisions. They generally relate to what I'll call staffing ratios, staffing to child ratios, and then a lot of that training that was referenced before. To your second point, I don't know if this will be a meaningful response, but I agree with you in the sense that, the measures that Aaron referenced for childcare slots and childcare providers, the reason it took us, one of the reasons I think it took us so long to come up with the result that we did, which was focused on working families having accessible, affordable childcare, is the idea that what I think is kind of the foundation of your statement, and that is that individuals and individual families should have the ability to make the choice that is best for them. That is, if my family decides that we are going to have one family member stay home, and we make that choice affirmatively, certainly that's an individual choice. Individuals have the autonomy to do that. Conversely, if an individual wishes to, if both individuals within a family unit, both of the adults, if they wish to work, the result that the group, the Dream Up group, came to was really this underpinning this idea that our child care system should allow individuals to make that decision, to allow them to enter the workforce. The accessibility of child care shouldn't be an issue that forces someone into a professional career decision they don't wish to make. And I think one of the measures that in a perfect world I'd love to have is this idea of wait list. The average wait list for someone to enter childcare, because I think it gets at the point that, again, that I think is underpinning your comment about, individuals having choice. And if I choose to send allow my child to go to an unregulated provider or have a family member watch that child, that provider is not referenced in that the numbers that we have, the regulated child care centers or the regulated slots. However, we know that from working, and Kelly can talk to this, talking with our child care providers, the wait list right now for regulated child care providers is pushing 2 years. So people, even though they're making that decision, there are a lot of people, I have no doubt, that are making that decision. I think, Aaron, you have a family member watch your children, right? Yep. Not a center, not a family-based childcare. Aaron's slots don't show up on the curve. Nevertheless, taking all those individuals out of that equation, we still have a 2-year wait to get your child into childcare, which is absolutely impacting our businesses, which is, I think, again, the message that Dave Ekman and Dale Knapp were referencing. I think I agree with you, Supervisor Baker, that keeping at the center of our thought process that whatever intervention or whatever role we play, if any, that the county wants to make sure that our approach doesn't intrude on the autonomy of individuals to make those very personal, very family-oriented decisions, I think is really important. But we'll send out, we can send out via email to all members of the committee, the regulations that we examined. And we looked at those as a group, thinking back to, as Elsa said, almost not quite a year ago, because that was after we got the grant, that we sat down and the representatives from DCF, the Department of Children and Families, talked a lot about those regulations, but we'd be happy to share those. Those certainly are things that impact providers. They are, I would say, outside the scope of the direct control of the county, because those are state administrative code and state law requirements. Of course, I say outside direct control because, of course, the county could, as you do oftentimes with other resolutions, call upon the state to re-examine potentially those regulations and see if there's unnecessary barriers. But going back to Mr. Ekman, I think one of the other things he said is a lot of those regulations are there for the right reason. Absolutely. We want child care providers to be safe. As Kelly shared, there's a reason that they need to know how to do CPR. There's a reason that they have all those requirements about staffing ratios. I have 2 children, and now they're 9 and 12, but when they were younger, man, 2 was a stretch for me. I can't imagine if I had a couple of infants. And what's the staffing ratio for infants? Is it 1 to 3?
1 to 4.
1 to 4.
And babies can't tell you what happens during their day. So,
Yeah.
right? Like, we want to protect them as best as we can.
So we'll send those regulations, but those two are, we said, I think Aaron said this earlier, this is a complex issue. Childcare is a complex thing. The regulations are complex for that reason, but certainly to your point, Supervisor Baker, perhaps an opportunity for the state of Wisconsin to take a look at those things. And that actually is one of the areas, not to bounce around to housing, but there's a large push that was discussed at the LEDGE conference yesterday, really calling upon the state of Wisconsin and even more so local municipalities. And this is an area where some counties are getting involved. Washington County is one. To convene those stakeholders, local municipalities, to examine what opportunities exist relative to zoning requirements for housing that restricts the supply of housing. We have a lot of municipalities across the state of Wisconsin that have minimum lot sizes, setbacks, size restrictions relative to the footprint of their house, that, quite honestly, the house that I live in probably couldn't be built in a number of, I know it couldn't be built in a number of the municipalities in Marathon County based on the size. It's a very modest house. So that is one area, again, where the county has, in some parts of the state, counties have engaged those local municipalities. That is somewhat easier, I think, as it relates to housing, because those are local regulation as opposed to, a lot of it is local regulation as opposed to state regulation, which is really the heart of childcare. But we'll send those out hopefully later today, if not tomorrow.
Could I just offer that child caring staff could walk you through those regulations if you'd like us to come back and do a little bit more assistance on those? Yeah. Thank you.
That would be great.
I'd like to add to the regulations. So one of my friends, he's like, the key to changing how much revenue comes through a child care facility is you need to increase the number of infants that you're watching. Well, on my way here today, I was like, oh my gosh, could you imagine if there was a tornado and you had to grab 4 infants? Could you imagine grabbing 2 of them at the same time and you're also panicked? No, so like changing those regulation ratios are not the answer. And because it comes up a lot, so just keep that in mind. Is there a tornado? How many babies am I grabbing? Because that's what it's there for. And to go back to the comment about the public good, you asked when did childcare become a public good? Well, we have to go back to just after World War II when in the following decades, when we became a 2-household working family. When that became the norm is when it became a public good. And yes, a lot of people did rely on their families, but if you look at that curve on the screen there, in 2010, we had way more availability of regulated childcare. Granted, we had a higher population. Well, actually, I don't quote me on that because I don't know. That was just because I know that our population is declining, and the good is also declining, but it's not at an equivalent rate. So we have to think about too. A lot of our specialists and medical specialists, they're not from here. They don't have friends. They don't have family. We wouldn't have been able to bring in Dr. Azella Toms into our community if she had young kids because there was no available childcare for her to find. So these are also the things that we have to think about when that is not just us and our family. I wouldn't certainly want to take my kid to an unregulated childcare in a new community that I've never, that I haven't had the chance to explore or create those relationships. So again, I'm going to follow up with that. This is an incredibly complex issue, and it's time for us to maybe redefine, what the childcare industry is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Well, this has been a pretty good discussion, and I'm sure we're not done discussing this yet, but thank you for your time, and I'm sure at our next meeting you'll probably be back. So, thank you.
We'll give you an update.
Okay, moving on to 7F, discussion of the Chamber's new branding. Lance?
Sure, I can take it. And there are some pages in your packet. I apologize, I should have just, I think it starts on page 32. The short answer is that a great many years ago, and I hope that image and that logo looks familiar to everybody. A great many years ago, Marathon County government, as well as a lot of other local governments working in connection with the Chamber of Commerce, thank you, the McDevco and some other entities went through a branding process. My understanding, they hired a consultant, and the result was this Marathon County logo that you see before you in the tagline of Wisconsin Central Time, or where time is on your side. And again, the Chamber was a central figure in that. Earlier this year, either late last year or just earlier this year, the Chamber of Commerce communicated, I'm on their board, and they communicated through their board that they were moving away from that logo. So the Chamber of Commerce new logo looks fundamentally different than what is before you. And let me just see if the chamber was. Yeah, right here was the Wausau Region Chamber. So they moved away from that logo. They've moved into the old depot building that's being remodeled, right as you come across the river in the city of Wausau. So their brand has been changed. It really mirrors a railroad depot logo. So with that, I just wanted to make everyone on this committee, I spoke with Chair Gibbs, and my question was, who do I tell? And since that was undertaken as an economic development initiative, I believe Chair Gibbs said bring it to this committee. So just making you aware of that change. I'm not sure what, if anything, that means for the county and the other entities that have utilized this logo and this brand. And you'll see, all of our departments utilize this logo. A number of municipalities do as well. McDevco does. So just making you aware, perhaps there's an opportunity, should you desire to do so, to have us interface with those other municipalities and the other partners, the original partners from that branding effort, to see if there's a desire to go out again and evaluate whether or not some rebranding would be necessary. But certainly within Marathon County, within Marathon County government, we make wide use of that logo on all of our letterhead and other things. So that's all. It was just an educational update for all of you as to what the chamber has decided to do, and certainly that change makes sense for the chamber. What, if any, impact it has for us, I don't know. And happy to take any questions. My knowledge on the history is somewhat limited. It certainly predated me, this branding effort. But that's as kind of how I see where we are today, Chair Seefeld.
Thank you. Is there any questions from the committee? So that they're just.
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Supervisor Baker.
So I haven't given this a lot of thought, but I would prefer to see us put our resources into things like affordable housing and childcare than in spending resources on rebranding. So, thank you.
Thank you. You took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, I agree with Supervisor Baker. We do have to keep honing on this housing and childcare. So, any other comments? If none, we'll move on to number eight. Number 8, next meeting date and time, announcements and future agenda items. Committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussion. 8B, next meeting, Tuesday, April 6th at Thursday, thank you. April 6th at 3 p.m. Number 9, adjournment. I will take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Supervisor Rosenberg, second by Supervisor Niedermeyer. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.